So picture this. It's a random Tuesday. You're sitting in a coffee shop. Maybe it's one you've visited 100 times, or maybe you've never set foot in it before.
Right.
You're reaching for a sugar packet, the little bell on the door chimes, and some stranger in a beige coat walks past the window. And then, all of a sudden, the world it tilts.
It's that specific feeling, that sort of vibrating stillness. The noise in the room seems to drop away for a second, and you are just hit with this overwhelming, absolute conviction.
Yes.
I have been here before. I have done this. I have reached for this exact sugar packet, heard this exact chime, and seen that exact beige coat walk by.
It's not really a memory, though, is it? It feels, I don't know, thinner than that. It feels like a shimmer, like you're suddenly standing on a trap door in time that's about to swing open.
A shimmer.
Yeah.
That's a perfect description. It really is. It's the sensation where the present moment, just for an instant, wears the mask of the past.
We call it déjà vu. It's French for already seen.
Mm-hmm.
And if you felt it, you are not alone. You're part of, what, about 2/3 of the human population who have stood on that trap door.
A huge majority of us, yeah.
But here's the thing that always bugs me about the way we talk about déjà vu. We treat it like a quirk, like a fun little cocktail party topic. Oh, weird, I had déjà vu. And then we just move on.
We do. We shake our heads, blink a couple of times, and just sort of re-enter reality.
But today, I want to refuse to move on. I want to stay in that shimmer for the next hour. Because when we actually look at this stack of research you've brought in today, and it is a massive stack, by the way, it seems like this little quirk might actually be a loose thread.
Mm-hmm.
And if we pull on it hard enough, the whole sweater of our reality might, just unravel.
It's certainly a thread that leads to some very strange places. We have sources here ranging from, hard-nosed 19th century neurology and computational brain modeling, all the way to philosophy. And yes, serious scientific investigations into reincarnation.
And we are going to cover all of that. We're going to look at the wiring in the brain, the so-called glitch theories, the philosophy of time, and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, you actually have been there before.
So the mission today is really to find the source. Is it a short circuit, a simple memory error, or is it something much more fundamental about the nature of consciousness itself?
So let's start with the skeptics. Or maybe it's better to say, let's start with the mechanics. Because for years, my assumption was always that déjà vu was just my brain misfiring. Like a computer stuttering while it's loading a web page.
And that's the dominant materialist view. It makes perfect sense why we go there first. The brain is a machine, and, machines have glitches. There's a specific theory from the 1960s proposed by Robert Efron called split perception. It was the gold standard explanation for a really long time.
Right. This is the timing error theory, isn't it?
Essentially, yes. Imagine your brain has two cables coming in, one from your left hemisphere, one from the right. Or signals from your left eye and your right eye. Normally, these signals hit the processing center at the exact same moment. The sync is perfect.
Okay.
You see the coffee shop, and it's just one single cohesive moment.
Right, it's just now.
But Efron argued, what if there's a delay? A tiny millisecond delay in one of those cables. Maybe you're tired or distracted, or there's some kind of neural bottleneck. So the signal from the right side arrives now.
Okay.
The brain processes it, but maybe just shallowly, kind of unconsciously. But then the signal from the left side arrives a millisecond later.
So I'm basically getting the same email twice, back to back.
Exactly. And that's a perfect analogy. The first one is processed vaguely, the second one hits, and your brain's filing system goes, wait, I have a record of this. It flags that second signal as a memory because it literally just processed the first one.
It stamps past on something that is absolutely present.
Precisely. The present moment gets misfiled as a memory.
Here's my problem with that, though, and I'm curious if the literature addresses this. If I'm typing on my laptop and the letters lag for a second, I don't feel a sense of profound mystical awe. I just feel annoyed.
That is a very, very valid critique.
Right, déjà vu isn't just, I've seen this. It's emotional, it feels spooky, it feels significant. If it's just a timing error in my visual cortex, why does it come with this heavy feeling of, like, uncanny valley weirdness?
And that is exactly where the split perception theory starts to crumble, or at least becomes insufficient to explain the full experience. A visual echo shouldn't trigger an existential crisis.
No.
To explain the feeling, we have to look deeper at how the brain actually categorizes experience. And this brings us to a more modern idea, the dual process theory.
Okay, so break down the dual process for me.
So the brain has two very distinct jobs when it recognizes something. Job one is recollection. Job two is familiarity. We tend to lump them together, but they are neurologically separate systems.
Recollection is, that's the details, right?
Yeah. Recollection is what researchers call mental time travel. It is specific, it is context, I remember this man, his name is Dave. I met him at that conference in Chicago back in 2019. He was wearing a blue tie. You can place the memory on a timeline, in a context.
Got it. And familiarity.
Familiarity is just a temperature reading. It's a gut check. It's that feeling of knowing without any of the details. It's seeing a face in a crowd and having that powerful feeling that you know them, but having absolutely zero idea if they're your dentist or some guy you sat next to on a plane 3 years ago.
The butcher on the bus phenomenon.
Exactly that. You know the butcher perfectly when he's behind his counter, in context. But you put him on a bus, out of context, and all you have is familiarity, that glowing feeling of recognition, but zero recollection, no data.
So how does this create déjà vu?
The theory is that déjà vu is a decoupling of these two systems. For some reason, maybe a bit of neural noise, maybe fatigue, maybe a chemical imbalance, your brain turns the familiarity dial up to maximum. It just screams, I know this.
But the recollection department is empty.
The recollection department is frantically checking the files and saying, we've got nothing. We have never been to this coffee shop. We do not know this man in the beige coat.
So you have this intense sensation of recognition, but a complete and total absence of history.
And that conflict, that clash between the feeling of, I know this, and the rational knowledge of, I have no proof, is what creates the eeriness. In fact, some researchers argue that the spooky feeling is actually a safety mechanism. They call it a check engine light.
A check engine light for what? Like, warning, memory systems failing.
In a way, yes. The frontal regions of your brain, your logic centers, the prefrontal cortex, are constantly monitoring your internal state. They see the familiarity dial is redlining. They check the memory banks and see they're empty, so they realize there's a mismatch.
Okay.
So they generate that feeling of wrongness or uncanniness to tell you, the conscious you, do not trust this feeling.
That is fascinating. So the, whoa, this is a weird sensation, is actually my rational brain trying to save me from basically a hallucination.
Exactly. It's the brain saying, I am flagging this experience as unreliable. This actually explains a really interesting piece of data, which is that déjà vu happens less as we get older.
See, I would have assumed it happens more as you get older, because your memory gets worse, more prone to glitches.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But it peaks in the teens and 20s. The theory is that young, healthy brains are very, very rigorous about checking for these conflicts. They have a very sensitive check engine light.
Okay.
As we age, our brains might get a little lazier with the verification process. The familiarity circuit fires. And the older brain just says, hey, guess I've been here before, and move it on without flagging the error.
Sure, I've been to Paris. Why not?
Basically, the awe, the weirdness, it requires that internal conflict. Without the conflict check, it's just a fleeting thought.
I want to dig into why the familiarity triggers in the first place, though. Because it's one thing to say the dial turned up, but why did it turn up?
Yeah.
Is it totally random? Or is there something in the environment that's actually triggering it?
That leads us to the work of Anne Cleary at Colorado State University. She's done some absolutely fascinating work using virtual reality to test something called the Gestalt theory.
Gestalt. That usually refers to shapes.
Right.
The whole being greater than the sum of its parts.
Right. The shape of a situation. Cleary's hypothesis was that we aren't experiencing déjà vu because we remember the specific details of a place, but because we recognize the geometry of the place, the spatial layout.
Okay, walk me through the experiment.
Okay.
Because this VR study seems to be a real cornerstone in the modern research on this.
It really is. So Cleary and her team created these virtual environments. Think of early 2000s video game graphics, not super realistic, but spatially very clear. They'd put participants in a headset and have them navigate through a specific scene, let's say a virtual bowling alley.
Okay, I'm in a virtual bowling alley.
You walk in, there's a lane on your left, there's a counter on the right, there's a potted plant in the corner, a shoe rack in the back. You explore it, you learn the layout. Then, later in the experiment, they drop you into a completely different scene, a subway station. The textures are different, tile instead of wood. The lighting is different. It's clearly a subway, not a bowling alley. But, and here's the absolute key, the spatial layout is identical.
Identical? How?
The turnstiles are exactly where the bowling lanes were. The ticket booth is exactly where the shoe counter was. The garbage can is in the same spot as the potted plant. The geometry, the skeleton of the room is a perfect match.
And what happened? Did people notice?
They reported intense feelings of déjà vu, but they didn't say, oh, this is laid out just like the bowling alley. They couldn't consciously retrieve the bowling alley memory because the skin of the room was so different. The recollection system drew a blank.
But their familiarity circuit lit up.
It recognized the skeleton, it saw the pattern.
That explains so much. I feel like I've had that exact experience walking into a hotel lobby or a restaurant in a city I've never been to and getting this powerful wave of familiarity. I'm probably just recognizing the layout of some TGI Fridays I went to in 2012.
We are pattern matching machines. Evolutionarily, it makes a lot of sense. If you know the layout of a certain type of cave means safe or, full of bears, you don't need that cave to have the same wall art to recognize the danger. You just recognize the shape.
So my check engine light is firing because my internal pattern matcher sees a match. But my conscious memory sees a total mismatch.
Correct. The conflict is between your geometric intuition and your factual memory.
But there was another part of that Cleary study that I found really, I don't know, disheartening. Because it killed one of my favorite parts of the whole déjà vu experience.
Let me guess. The prediction element.
Yes. When I'm deep in a déjà vu moment, I swear to you, I feel like I know what is going to happen next. I feel prescient. I feel like my friend is about to drop her spoon or a blue car is going to drive by. It's this overwhelming sense that I have the script.
The I knew that would happen sensation. It's extremely common. It's almost a hallmark of the experience for many people.
So did Cleary test that?
She did. And this is where science kind of ruins the party a little bit. Because she had people in these virtual environments, she could pause the simulation right at the moment they reported feeling déjà vu.
Okay, so she freezes the game.
Right. She'd say, okay, you feel like you've been here before. You feel like you know this path. The hallway goes forward. Which way does it turn next, left or right?
And the participants, they felt like they knew.
They were convinced. They reported very high confidence levels. Oh, I feel it. It definitely turns left. They were wrong. Statistically, they were just guessing. They performed no better than chance. 50-50.
Ouch. So the feeling is a complete illusion.
It turns out familiarity breeds an illusion of prediction. Your brain makes a leap. It assumes that because it recognizes the map, it must know the route. But it's a trick. You feel like a prophet, but you're just a confused pattern matcher.
That is actually kind of tragic. It strips the magic away completely. It's just a confidence trick my own brain is playing on me.
If you look at it purely through the lens of Cleary's study and the Gestalt theory, yes, it's a mechanical failure. A very interesting mapping error, but an error nonetheless.
But our source stack doesn't stop there, and I'm glad it doesn't, because it's just a broken map. It feels like it misses the texture of the experience. We have a whole section here on Henri Bergson. This is from 1908, a French philosopher.
Bergson is a massive shift in gears. We are absolutely leaving the lab and entering the salon. But what's so fascinating is that his theories from over a century ago are starting to align with some very weird, very modern physics.
He talks about the shadow present. I just love that phrase. It sounds like the title of a sci-fi novel.
It is poetic, isn't it? Bergson's main argument was that we have a fundamental misunderstanding of what memory is. We tend to think of memory as a storage closet. Experience happens now, and then we shove it in the closet to retrieve later.
It's linear. Cause and effect. Past and present are separate.
Bergson said no. He argued that memory is created simultaneously with perception. The moment you see the coffee cup, your brain is instantly, in real time, creating the memory of the coffee cup. They are twins. Perception and memory are born at the exact same instant.
So I am living the moment and remembering the moment at the very same time.
Always. Every second of your life. But usually we're distracted. Bergson split the self into two parts. The actor and the spectator.
Okay, explain those.
The actor is you, the part that's focused on the world. You're grabbing the cup, you're talking to your friend, you're dodging traffic. The actor is focused on the utility of the moment, on getting things done.
Right, the practical self.
And the spectator is the part of you that is passively recording everything, just watching the self. Usually the actor is so loud and busy that we completely ignore the spectator. The memory track, which he called the shadow, is there walking right beside us, but we don't look at it.
Until we do.
Until we slip. Bergson suggested that déjà vu happens when our attention wavers. Maybe we're exhausted, maybe the ambient noise drops for a second. The actor takes a micro break, and in that brief silence, we suddenly notice the spectator. We see the shadow.
And because the shadow is a memory, even though it's a memory of right now, we interpret it as a memory of the past.
Exactly. We are catching our own brain in the act of archiving the present. He called it a recollection of the present.
That totally reframes the whole thing. It's not a glitch anymore. It's a moment of, I don't know, hyper-awareness.
It's a peek behind the curtain. It's the realization that now is actually a composite experience, a fusion of perception and memory. And when that fusion slips just for a second, you see the seam.
This reminds me of some of the more out there ideas in physics, like the block universe theory, where the past, present, and future all exist simultaneously.
It definitely touches on that. If all time exists at once, then remembering isn't looking back, it's just looking across. But let's not go too deep down that quantum wormhole just yet. I want to ground this back in the brain, because Bergson's spectator and actor concept actually maps terrifyingly well onto brain anatomy.
You mean the actual physical wiring?
The actual wiring. To understand that, we need to talk about epilepsy, specifically temporal lobe epilepsy, or TLE. Because for people with TLE, déjà vu isn't a fun philosophical moment. It's the warning siren of an impending seizure.
Right. The sources mentioned a neurologist named Hewlings-Jackson, which is a great name, by the way.
John Hewlings-Jackson, back in the 19th century, he was treating patients who had what he called dreamy states. That was his term for them.
Dreamy states. It sounds almost pleasant.
It wasn't always. He described it as a voluminous mental state. Patients would feel a double consciousness. They would be fully aware they were in the room talking to the doctor, but simultaneously feel they were somewhere else or someone else.
That is Bergson's actor and spectator, literally manifesting in a patient, one part in the present, one part observing.
It really is, and modern technology allows us to see exactly where in the brain the split happens. We need to get a bit granular here. We need to talk about the difference between the hippocampus and the rhinal cortices.
Okay, let's open the hood. I know the hippocampus. That's the big memory center, the librarian of the brain.
Right. Think of the hippocampus as the vast archive. The stacks. It holds the context, the dates, the narratives, the recollection. But sitting right underneath the hippocampus are the entortin and parahynal cortices. Together, we can call them the rhinal cortex.
And what do?
They are the gatekeepers. They're the front desk of the library. Before a signal gets filed in the archive, it passes through the rhinal cortex. And the rhinal cortex is responsible for one thing: familiarity.
It's just that feeling of knowing.
Just the feeling.
Oh.
So let's use the library analogy. In a normal déjà vu experience, you walk in. The librarian at the front desk, the rhinal cortex, looks at you and screams, "I know this guy." But then you walk back to the stacks, the hippocampus, to find your file, and the shelves are completely empty.
That's the disconnect we talked about.
Right. But in temporal lobe epilepsy, the seizure often starts as an electrical storm in the rhinal cortex. It's confined to the familiarity center. So the patient gets hit with a tsunami of pure recognition, pure, unadulterated, "I know this," but the hippocampus isn't involved yet. So there is no memory, just the feeling cranked up to 1,000.
And we can prove this is the spot.
We can induce it. There are studies where neurosurgeons during brain surgery electrically stimulate the rhinal cortices in conscious patients, and the patients immediately say, "Whoa, déjà vu." They can turn it on and off like a light switch.
That is just wild. You can mechanically trigger what feels like a spiritual experience.
But it gets darker. It gets much more intense, because sometimes that electrical storm doesn't stay in the rhinal cortex. Sometimes it spreads.
Spreads to where?
It spreads to the hippocampus and the amygdala, which is the brain's emotion center. When that happens, you don't just get déjà vu. You get something called déjà vécu.
Already lived.
This is a different beast entirely. We are not talking about a fleeting shimmer anymore. We were talking about a prolonged, conviction-filled experience where the patient believes they are literally reliving a past event or a past life or a whole timeline.
The source material mentioned a patient who felt like he was in the movie Groundhog Day.
The Groundhog Day patient. This was a man with a condition called transient epileptic amnesia. And imagine the horror of this. He didn't just feel like, "Oh, I've been here before." He felt with absolute certainty that he had lived his entire life before. He actually stopped watching television.
Wait, really? Why? Even new shows?
Even the news! He was convinced he had seen every show, every movie, every news report before. He would claim he knew what the weather report was going to say.
But he couldn't have known that.
Of course not. But his brain was tagging everything, every new input, as retrieved memory. Imagine the profound isolation of that. You can't connect with anyone because you feel like you're just rewatching a rerun of your own life.
That is a profound loneliness.
Yeah.
It's like being trapped in a solipsistic nightmare where nothing is new.
It creates a total sense of meaninglessness. If I've already lived this, why does my choice matter? It shows us just how fragile our grip on now really is. Our entire sense of the present is just a neurochemical construct. And if you tweak the voltage in the temporal lobe, the present collapses into the past.
It really makes you wonder how much of our perception of linear time is actually real and how much is just our brain's filing system keeping the files in order.
Exactly.
I want to look at the computational side of this for just a second, because we've talked about the biology, but we have some sources here that actually model this with AI and neural networks. And they have a theory that connects back to this intensity of feeling.
This is the work on robustness. It gets a little abstract, but stick with me. Computational neuroscientists distinguish between two measures of a memory network: FAME and FAMS.
Which stand for energy and slope.
Right. Think of the brain state like a ball rolling across a bumpy landscape. A memory is a valley. When the ball rolls into a valley and settles at the bottom, that's a stable, detailed memory. That stability is energy.
Okay. Ball in the hole. Stable. Got it.
But slope is how fast the ball is rolling down the hill into the valley. It's the rate of change.
So it's the speed of recognition.
Yes, and the models suggest that the human brain has a massive capacity for detecting slope, that rapid aha feeling of familiarity, even if it doesn't have the capacity to store the full energy state, which are all the details.
Which explains why I can recognize thousands and thousands of faces, even if I can't remember any names.
That's the famous standing experiment from 1973. They showed people 10,000 images just for a few seconds each. Later, people could identify which ones they had seen with incredible accuracy. We have a massive slope detector. We are built to recognize familiarity instantly.
But the energy, the full memory, the details, takes more bandwidth to store.
Exactly. And the slope signal, that feeling, it decays very, very rapidly. Milliseconds. Which matches the experience of déjà vu perfectly. It hits you, it spikes with incredible intensity, and then it's just gone. It's a ghost signal.
Before we leave the brain glitch section and move into what I'm going to call the Twilight Zone section, we have to mention the cousins of déjà vu, because apparently this family of glitches is pretty big.
It is. It's a whole spectrum of strange experiences. First, you have jamais vu, never seen.
The exact opposite of déjà vu.
This is when something you know intimately, something incredibly familiar, suddenly feels completely alien and new.
Oh, I've had this happen with words. You say a word over and over again.
Semantic satiation. You say the word door 30 times. Door, 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 door. And suddenly it's not a portal to another room, it's just a noise. It's a meaningless grunt. You have momentarily stripped the familiarity tag off the concept.
It's genuinely terrifying in its own way. It's like the texture of reality just falls off for a second.
Then there is déjà vu. Already dreamed.
This one I find fascinating. It's that very specific feeling that the current moment was something you dreamt about, maybe 3 nights ago.
And this is distinct from déjà vu. Brain stimulation studies show it happens in different parts of the brain. But it raises a huge question. Are you actually remembering a lost dream? Or is your brain creating a fake dream memory on the spot to explain the strange feeling of familiarity?
The precognitive dream theory. We'll definitely have to get to that in a future deep dive.
And finally, there's presque vu, almost seen.
The tip of the tongue phenomena.
That feeling of an impending epiphany that never, ever arrives. You are right on the brink of making the connection. The circuit is buzzing, but it just won't close. It's deeply, deeply frustrating.
Okay, so we have dissected the brain. We've looked at the rhinal cortex, the timing errors, the check engine lights. If you are a committed materialist, the case is pretty much closed. Déjà vu is a hiccup in the meat machine.
But
Now we have to look at the other side of the stack. Because for centuries, humans haven't described this as a hiccup. They've described it as a memory. And there is a researcher in our notes who took that claim very, very seriously.
Ian Stevenson.
This is where we have to be very rigorous in our thinking. Because as soon as you say the word reincarnation, a lot of people just roll their eyes. They think of crystal balls and scams and New Age bookshops. Ian Stevenson was not that guy.
No, he was a psychiatrist. Chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Virginia School of Medicine.
He was. And he approached this not as a religious quest, but as a data problem. He collected over 2,500 case files over decades. And he didn't even like the word reincarnation. He preferred terms like consciousness transfer or extracerebral memory.
And he focused on kids, right, very young kids. almost exclusively children between the ages of 2 and 4. His argument was that this is the window where the transfer memories are still fresh, before the cultural conditioning and the memories of the current life overwrite them.
So give me a typical case, because 2,500 cases is just a number. What does one of these actually look like?
Okay, so let's look at the general profile of a strong Stevenson case. A 3-year-old boy in a village in, say, India or Sri Lanka begins screaming that he isn't from here. He says, "My name is not Ravi. My name is something else. I live in a village called X. I have a wife named Y, and I was shot."
Okay. Kids have active imaginations. They say things.
Absolutely. That's the first line of skepticism, and it's a valid one. But Stevenson's method was to then go to the village the kid mentioned, a village the family had never visited, had no connection to. He would try to find a family that matched the description. And in many cases, he would find that a man did die there by gunshot a few years prior, matching the timeline.
Okay, that's spooky. But maybe the kid overheard a conversation? Maybe his parents were talking about a news story?
That's the standard counterargument, cryptoamnesia. But Stevenson focused on the cases where the details were incredibly specific and obscure, nicknames that only the deceased's wife knew, the locations of hidden money or objects, things that couldn't have been public knowledge.
So things you could just look up.
Exactly. But the most compelling evidence, the stuff that is hardest to explain away with coincidence or fraud, was the physical evidence.
The birthmarks.
The birthmarks. Stevenson published a massive 2-volume tome called Reincarnation and Biology. He documented hundreds of cases where children were born with birthmarks or even physical defects that corresponded precisely to the fatal wounds of the deceased person they claimed to be.
So if the previous person was, say, shot in the chest.
The child would be born with a small, round, hyperpigmented lesion on their chest, and, this is the crucial part, often a larger, more irregular hypopigmented lesion on their back, corresponding exactly to the bullet's entry and exit wounds. He would get autopsy reports to verify.
That is biologically very hard to process. How does a memory print itself onto the skin of a developing fetus?
That is the million-dollar question. Stevenson didn't have a final answer, but he argued for the concept of the experiencer. He suggested that there is some kind of substrate, he called it an intermediate body, maybe it's something quantum, that carries the imprint of the trauma from one life to the next, and that imprint then templates the new biological form.
So bringing this all back to our main topic, how does this connect to a simple case of déjà vu in a coffee shop?
The theory would be leakage. If consciousness can transfer from one body to another, the wipe between lives might not always be clean, especially if the previous life ended suddenly or traumatically, which many of Stevenson's cases did.
So my déjà vu isn't a glitch in my current brain. It's a fragment of a file from a previous hard drive that didn't get properly deleted.
That's the idea. Stevenson called some of these cases assisted reincarnation. Maybe you walk into a house you've never been to in this life, but the experiencer, the deep self, remembers the layout. The Gestalt isn't from a VR video game you played last week. It's from a house you lived in 1945.
And if we look at those really intense cases, the déjà vu cases we talked about, through this lens, they stop looking like seizures and start looking more like, I don't know, possessions.
Or overlays. If the barrier between the past personality and the present personality thins for some reason, you might get that Groundhog Day feeling. The statement, "I have lived this before," becomes terrifyingly literal. I, this consciousness, am living this again.
It's a terrifying thought, but it's also weirdly hopeful, isn't it? It implies that death isn't a wall, it's just a filter. And sometimes the filter leaks.
It connects to some very fringe but interesting ideas in physics, like quantum consciousness. The theories from Penrose and Hameroff that consciousness might reside in the quantum state of microtubules inside our neurons. If consciousness is quantum information, it can't be destroyed by the laws of physics. It can only change its state.
So the brain isn't the source of consciousness, it's just the receiver, it's the radio.
Exactly. And if you damage the radio, as in temporal lobe epilepsy, or if the atmospheric conditions are just right, as in a moment of fatigue causing déjà vu, you might suddenly pick up a faint signal from a different station.
Before we float completely away into the ether, I need to ground us one last time, because there is one more source in the SPAC that suggests you don't need a past life or a seizure to feel this. Sometimes all you need is the flu.
Yes. The pharmacology section. There's a famous case study of a perfectly healthy man who took a combination of 2 drugs, amantadine and phenylpropanolamine, to treat a bad flu infection.
standard meds.
Fairly standard at the time, yeah. But he started having intense, recurrent déjà vu. It just wouldn't stop all day long.
Just from the medicine.
Just from the meds. As soon as he stopped taking them, the déjà vu went away. This points a giant neon finger at a specific neurotransmitter, dopamine.
Because those drugs affect dopamine levels.
Yes. They increase dopamine activity in the brain. The theory is that a hyperdopaminergic state in the medial temporal lobe, that same region we've been talking about all along, can trigger the sensation. There was another case involving 5-HTP, which is a serotonin precursor, that did the same thing.
So if your dopamine or serotonin levels spike for whatever reason, you might suddenly feel like a time traveler.
It confirms that regardless of the ultimate source, whether you believe it's the soul or the software, the mechanism is chemical. You can induce what feels like a metaphysical experience with a pill.
Which brings us right back to the central tension of this whole deep dive. We basically have two camps here.
You do. Camp A, the materialist.
Déjà vu is a hiccup. It's a check engine light. It's a mismatched timestamp of the rhinal cortex. It's a trick of geometry. It's a fascinating but ultimately broken biological process, a bug in the code.
And Camp B, the metaphysical.
Déjà vu is a glimpse. It's the spectator catching the actor in the act. It's a leak from a past life. It's evidence that consciousness is not strictly bound by the linear time our brains construct for us.
And, I think that shadow-present concept from Bergson, the philosopher, actually bridges these two camps beautifully.
How so?
Because even if you take the purely materialist view that the brain is just making a memory at the same time it's perceiving reality, that is still a profound, mind-bending realization about the nature of our own existence.
It means we aren't really living in the now. We're living in a construct of the now that is immediately being woven into the fabric of the past.
Exactly. We are constantly, every millisecond, creating this shadow. We're just built to ignore it for practical reasons. But when the shimmer hits, when that trapdoor opens for a second, we are seeing the mechanics of our own consciousness. We are seeing the seam where the brain stitches you together.
So the real mystery isn't, why do we sometimes feel déjà vu?
No. If Bergson is right and the memory is always being made right alongside the perception, the real mystery is, why don't we feel it every single second of our lives?
Why are we so good at ignoring the shadow?
Exactly. Maybe déjà vu isn't the illusion. Maybe the smooth, linear flow of time that we experience every day is the illusion. And déjà vu is that rare moment the illusion fails, and for just a second, we see the truth.
That is a lot to process. I am definitely going to be thinking about the shadow present all week.
It changes how you walk down the street, doesn't it, knowing it's there?
It really does. So, to everyone listening, the next time the conversation stops and the light hits the table in a certain way and you feel that shimmer, don't just shake it off. Pause. Live in it for a second and ask yourself, is my internal cortex misfiring? Or is my soul remembering?
And honestly, whatever the answer is, enjoy the glitch. It's one of the only times you get to see the code.